Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to discuss the different types of hook strips that you're going to get, or interlocking strips that you would get, order, use, specify, install when it comes to interlocking thresholds. So interlocking thresholds, or interlocking weather stripping for that matter, is when two pieces come together to interlock so as to provide a mechanical means by which the intrusion of temperature, sound, moisture, energy, cold, heat is retarded from transmitting through an opening. Interlocking thresholds are very effective at keeping much of that out. And this is a PEMCO 101B. This is just a small, a very small piece of solid architectural bronze that's actually been done in a 722 or an oil rub bronze finish. It's an interlocking threshold. You're accustomed to those that are about 4.5 inch, maybe wider, maybe smaller, maybe ½ inch, 7/8, 1 inch, 1.25 inches, even taller. That they'll all have a feature to it that includes this lip sort of design here. Okay. So this is just the sample piece that I have on my desk to illustrate the different styles of hook strips. Hook strips are most generally the J hook, is what we call it. It's a J strip or a J hook. A J hook, because it looks like the letter J when you turn it on its end. The builder's hardware industry is not very imaginative when it comes to naming things, but I'm grateful that it's not, because it's just easier to remember a J. There's also an L hook, shaped like the letter L. L hooks are generally surface mounted, and let's take a look at a small collection of hook strips that I've put together. So in no particular order at all, but we will start with the J hook, I guess, because it's the most common. Okay, looks like a letter J. This is by PEMCO. This is their Z61, I think the part number is. We'll take a tour of that. Actually, let's confirm it's a Z61. Yeah, it is. Yes, it is. A Z61 is this part number. If you wanted this hook strip from PEMCO, you'd order a Z61. It's made of steel, and it's in a white coat galvanized finish. It would include nails. And how this works is it would install to the bottom of the door and engage the threshold just like that every time the threshold closes. Okay. This is an example of a J hook. There are others that we'll touch on in a moment. There is also an aluminum style that's shaped differently because it's extruded, where this is very likely roll formed when it's manufactured. That started out as a piece of flat material that's gone through a roll former. If you've ever seen a roll former at work, they're really cool. And if you've not seen one, then you want to take a look at one online running material. Really neat process. Here's another example of a J hook, but again, this is an extruded aluminum, so it looks a little bit different. And again, same sort of concept. Why would you want this one over the other one? Well, probably because you need aluminum, would be my guess. Is probably why you would use this. We very rarely would sell this item. It could just simply be that you don't want a piece of steel applied to your door. It could be that you don't want to mix different metals together. Galvanic corrosion does exist when you're mixing different materials together. You might just simply want it to be all aluminum. Now this is brass. Solid, this is purely brass. Most people do not get into being concerned over a disparate base material of the two parts touching each other, but very occasionally people are very concerned about that, depending on the application. So that PEMCO item, that's an A67 is what that one is. That would get attached to the bottom of the door as well, and I'm going to show you how they get attached in a moment. Now let's move to the L hook. And I have a Reese 133C here, and an L hook surface mounts. The J hooks mount to the bottom of the door. The L hook mounts to the face of the door. Now, why would you want one over the other? You would only want the L hook, in my estimation, when you're not going to take the door off the hinges to install everything. You're going to cut that threshold, you're going to screw it down, you're not pulling the door off. Either you can't, you don't want to, you don't have the ability to take it off, you're not permitted to take it off, I suppose. You can surface mount an L-hook on the inside face of the door so that it makes contact with that every time, just like that. Okay, that's made of aluminum. That's by Reese. That's their 133C part number. I'm going to keep that aside. Then, of course, we have a brass or a bronze L-hook as well. Same concept. If you're working with brass material, you might want a brass L-hook. You might want a brass hook because you can do a true oil-rubbed bronze on it. You might want it because you're building a $4 million house, and well, you probably wouldn't be using an exposed piece of hardware, but you probably wouldn't opt for aluminum when you're building an upper high-end costing house or a 5-star hotel, things of that nature. There are certain instances where the project would permit the use of certain materials, or you'd be using it because of durability. A piece of, I believe this, I'm quite sure this is extruded architectural bronze. This will last a century. This will last a millennia. Far more durable than aluminum would ever be. Plus would also give you that finish if you're looking for a true oil-rubbed bronze finish. That's what that would give you. Again, it's surface mounted. There is one more example that I have here, and it's also from Reese. This is not actually considered a hook strip, but I have used it, and I'll show you an example of where I've used it. It's kind of a hook strip, but it has an inserted piece of seal in here, a piece of vinyl. And I've used this to great effect to give me a really great mechanical seal there. I'll give me a mechanical seal with a weather seal as well. Same concept, surface mounted, seals it up really nice every single time. You're going to have some projection off the face of the door, but when you take into account the fact that you've got a really great seal happening, you might not be too concerned about having a little bit of projection of hardware. So this is a L hook as well, but it's a modified, it's a hybrid of both. It acts as a J hook, but it does so in a surface mounted option. So we've gone over all of the hooks that I have here. Let's switch to the screen view and just illustrate these points a little bit further. So the purpose of this video is to help determine what interlock strip or hook strip you might use, talk a little bit about interlock thresholds and weather stripping as well, but really to just touch on how a hook strip is, what it is, where you'd use it. So this is that 101 that we were using as an example. Okay. Now, in no particular order, let's scroll through and look at some different items. So from different manufacturers, Dorbin, Pemco, I actually forgot to pull up, let's pull up Reese. We'll start with Reese since I have that open. Okay, so I showed you a 133 and a 203. I don't know if I mentioned that modified hook is the 203, and they're used here. So it's interlocking weather stripping really is what it is. This is what it would look like mounted, onto a. This would work certainly on a. If this was the door, you could have a reverse bevel application. You're going to have great success mounting it overhead, especially overhead, where water really. If you've ever seen a steel door that's all rusted at the bottom, that's how that starts. How it starts. That water hits the header. It comes in. It lips over, and it just then drips into the top of the door, where it comes down the door, collects at the bottom of the door, and rusts the bottom of the door out. If you can stop it right there, that's how you're going to keep your door from rusting. That's the bottom line. Let's also look and see how they have it shown in an interlocking application. Okay, so here's some interlocks from Reese. So they have an L angle. They do list this 203 as a potential angle, hook strip, but then the classic roll-formed metal hook. They can do it in aluminum, apparently. That's not going to roll-form aluminum. and bronze. I'm sure that's going to be zinc with a wipe coat galvanized. You can see how an L hook is going to be mounted. Okay, and we'll see an image shortly on how a J hook is mounted. Interlock thresholds will very often feature a weep hole. They have drilled a small hole here and notched a little preparation in the face of the threshold 2 or 3 times down the length of a typical 3-foot threshold, so that any water that actually got into the trough area could just see its way on right on and out. A water pan is very typically used. It's a very thin piece of sheet metal, aluminum or brass material, very, very thin, that you install the threshold over. If you expect moisture, you're going to the point where you've done a weep hole, you'll want to order the additional water pan. Not all models would have weep holes, like this model here that's only 5/8 tall. There is no concept of a weep hole here. Okay. So that's Reese. Let's take a look at Dorbin. Dorbin is a company that's been around for at least 85 years now, and they do have interlock thresholds made of aluminum and architectural bronze, different shapes, different sizes. They do have their 32Z, I believe is this part number, for their hook strip. I like the Dorbin and others version of the hook strip because it has this little angle here. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment when we look at a different image of it. But remember that angle, whereas the Pemco model is not angled at all. It doesn't have that little giddy up if I'm really exaggerating it. I like the giddy up that's here, and I'll show you why in a moment. Then we come over to Pemco, which is where we kind of started. They have their 66 L angle, then they have their wipe coat galvanized, and then the aluminum version, different interlock thresholds as well. And really what differs interlock thresholds from each other is nothing more than the dimensional properties. If you're looking for an interlock threshold, the first question I ask is, what's the height? Meaning, what undercut do we have to work with? You know, you're usually working with something that is already existing. Here's a great image showing what a J-hook looks like when it's mounted. And you'll notice that they've taken the effort of rabbiting the bottom of the door. That's not the most common way to do it. The most common way to do it is you have a door, you have your threshold. This is awful. You're going to have to severely forgive this awful drawing. But they'll normally just mount it to the bottom of the door. Okay. Now what would be really nice is if you took the bottom of your door and mortised it, or rabbited it, I should say. And what that allows you to do is to run that door down and long. Gives you a better, actually it should obviously look more like that. But this would be over here. Okay, a better way to do it, if you can. Moving on to National Guard, here is a better image of it. Now, the reason I like that giddy up is because of the following. And you'll want to be sure if you want that, that you get it from a manufacturer who offers it. Here's your hook strip. Dorbin does, National Guard does, others may. Your threshold's going to sit in here. Why do we want that giddy up? Well, where is the head of my nail going to reside? It's obviously going to look more like that, but I don't want to give up room for the head of that nail. So what you'll notice is on those that don't have this angle to it is that the mouth opening is much larger because they have to account for the head of the nail. This dimension is greater than this dimension. That's why I like this model better. allows me a little bit tighter margin is what I'm saying. That's National Guard. Zero is a manufacturer who has this material as well. They do apparently have that as well. And an angle. A couple of really nice images here showing how the J-hook is installed, where that rabbeted bottom edge of the door, really, really, really nice and effective. Run that door down longer. And then, of course, the L angle that goes on the inside. And they use interlocking material in assemblies as well, where they're using other products to seal an opening. They use it part and parcel. Now this brings me to a favorite threshold of mine. It's the belt and suspenders approach. My door can sit in here and I can have a positive seal here, and I can run an L angle out here and really block it. I have got a line of defense here. I have a line of defense here with an L angle, an L hook, or I don't think you're going to want to stick a J hook in here, but you've got a line of defense here and then out here. This door is probably an outswing. It could be an inswing. If it's an outswing, that's great. You got your L angle here. If it's an inswing, I would recommend that you put a drip cap over here. And speaking of drip cap, you'll notice that Pemco showed a drip cap on that outside. That's a beautiful, very effective way by which to seal your door as well. You've got your door, you have your J-hook, you've got your threshold. Let's help keep that water, let's help keep that away, drive that water away from getting here at all. Very effective weighted by means to go about doing that. I really do like my belt and suspender threshold. I don't sell enough of them, and I really am thrilled when I see that someone has ordered one. All manufacturers make these. I'm just going through the catalogs in random fashion to illustrate the concept. Zero has, and I mentioned Zero because in the world of interlocking, they have a modular system as well, and they do it in bronze base material. And they didn't invent this product line, that's to be sure. But they do have these modular components. The back area that you can slide these pieces together, they would be quite loose when you put them together. You'd have to secure them down. Now, they don't have nearly the quantity of available modular components as was once upon a time available by a company called Accurate Metal, in fact. And Accurate had been in business, I believe, since the 19th century. I think the late 19th century. They were in business for over 100 years before they pulled the plug. Yeah, right here, 1898. They had a great offering of these modular components. And I only wish that I sold more of it before they went out of business. But an interlock concept exists very much in much of what they do. Okay? That's a unfortunate circumstance that they're no longer around. But just showing this to you to show you different concepts of the interlock principle. And of course you can see the advantage of having that offset or that stepped hook strip. A great application of showing how they have an outswing with an L hook. They had this really neat one that was, somewhat of a hybrid of both, I suppose. No one makes this, as far as I know, nowadays at all. A double step, very effective, of course, at preventing the intrusion of anything that's happening here. Variations on a theme as we scroll through. This is really more so just a trip down memory lane, at least for me it is. But they had options that others simply did not. The traditional J-hook, the step J-hook, the L hook, that Reese model that we see here. I didn't illustrate it being installed in this way. I suppose if you were dealt a certain set of cards that you had a large margin here, you could fit that in that area as well, obviously for that swing of door. That may not be awful to have it installed in this way. You could easily run a drip cap out here. Showing a drip cap here as well. And there you go. Now, there is a particular application that I effectively used the Reese, their part number 203C. I have a client on the Atlantic side, the east coast of Florida, where extreme weather is pretty common. They have these doors that were notoriously leaky. Water always got in. And what follows here are a series of photographs. They went so far as to install these really large drip caps. These are meant for the top of the door, not at the bottom. That's a little better image of what it looked like prior to us getting involved. That was the opening. Now, the trouble with the opening is the doors resided in this space, but there was this, drop-off that was here, this raised stoop that the doors closed over, showing it what it was showing the project when they were at the point where they needed to address this problematic opening. And with that stoop, the problem was you've got that stoop, but the doors were like this, and they swing in. And they had those really giant drip caps that were installed there. Okay, that was the area. That's the problem area. What in the world do you do? How do you seal that? The east coast of Florida, anywhere with extreme weather, that's going to get horizontal rain. That's nice to keep that way. But what happens when it's pushing it in this direction? And that was the challenge that we had for this client. That's unrelated, if I recall correctly. Another opening showing what they had to start with. Obviously, they had storm doors out here, which would not have been an awful idea. They've got evidence, some sort of evidence of I'm thinking a wide throw hinge or a parliament hinge is possibly what that is. A parliament hinge looks like the letter H when the hinge is in the open position. That storm door probably resided right here. And it's a parliament hinge, which is inherently a wide throw hinge. Spelling has always been an elusive skill. Just want to show you something more like what the client could have had. And these, by IDH, aren't too far off the mark. And over the years, there would have been lots of people who have made parliament hinges. It's basically a wide throw hinge, as I had said. And why would they have used a wide throw hinge? Well, because they wanted to probably take that door and get it out around. So they moved that vertical axis of pivoting out far enough to go 180 degrees. Wide throw hinges are a different conversation. So here was the inherent problem, if you recall. How to seal this area here. And here's what I came up with. And the reason I'm showing it is because it incorporated the 203C in an unusual way. Here. So here's their opening. And here's what I came up with. So those doors ran long. We took a National Guard 484 BR. This client bought everything solid bronze, as much as was possible. A 484 BR from National Guard. Let's take a look at what a 484 looks like. So what I had the client do was get this on a table saw and rip this leg off, leaving me only this lip area here. Okay, so rip that off. Took the 203 and routed a channel into the face of the door, creating a positive seal there. Get some caulk down inside the door, get this mortised flush and a channel routed, secure the threshold to that curb, a water pan underneath everything, a automatic door bottom on top of it to seal every time the door closes. That's a Reese 521, which the client actually ended up not using, regrettably, because they didn't like the look. And I understand that. It's a large piece of equipment. Reese does make smaller units as well, as do all these manufacturers. I'm not picking on or avoiding any single manufacturer. The 521 automatic door bottom, when you close the door, that seal is going to drop every single time. Okay, that's why I liked it. It's drop every time. So now, on top of that, we're going to install the drip cap concept. So we're getting the water to drive away. We're sealing here, and anything that gets past us from this, past us here, is going to get caught by that 203, which, if you recall, has that inserted piece of vinyl. So another way to use the interlock concept. I would suggest reviewing the Accurate book again, which I don't recall where I've got it off to. Here it is. For ideas. And while these, unfortunately, these folks pulled anchor and set sail about the second quarter of 2019 or so. You can use it as an idea book. I know that I do occasionally. There you go. Let's wrap up this video on camera. And it is my understanding that the client did actually get that mortised and then a channel routed to get that sunk to the face of the door. Screws would have gone in. That modified 484 would seal in here. I do think they ditched the 521. I believe that they did. I would not have. That's a door to a rooftop balcony that you're not going to be out there all the time. I live in southern Florida. I can tell you that it's like, and I'm from Chicago, I can tell you that Chicago, and I love Chicago, I love southern Florida, I love everywhere, right? I can tell you that you get about 6 weeks of sublime, maybe 4 weeks of sublime weather in Chicago. That point between spring and summer, maybe just after baseball starts, that point 2 or 3 weeks before Halloween. 3-4 weeks before Halloween. Sublime weather. Perfect. Florida's the same way. If you want to have dinner sitting outside, you got about 2 weeks at this end of the year, 2 weeks at this end of the year. Otherwise, it's too hot. That's the bottom line. Or it might be a little brisk to sit outside. In January, you're going to find that. When you go to a restaurant, they'll have the gas heaters outside. My point is that they're not going to see this stuff that often. They're not going to be sitting out there sipping coffee in August at all. And what we're trying to do is to keep the water out. That water goes in, destroys the floor around it. Someone owns that problem. And that's inherently why this video is important, is someone owns the problem of damage from improper gasketing. Whether it's the current owner or the next owner, someone's going to have to mitigate the problem or pay for it. You go to sell a house and you've got damage that's been detected by an inspector. Someone owns that problem. Also, I've had this week, in fact, a client is having built for him 2-inch thick tube steel, wrought iron, but tube steel door structure. The door itself is maybe 4 or 5 foot wide. It's 9 foot tall. The overall face is 20 foot tall, and the overall width is 12 foot wide. All the structure, the steel is being welded together to build a door. Not hard, not difficult at all. You have to cut, grind, weld. Easy. It's easy work conceptually. The question is on those types of doors which I had for the client. I've sold hardware to people with those doors. It's never considered important. How am I going to weather strip this opening? How am I going to weather strip the opening? Great question. Didn't think about it. Someone's going to own that problem. So to this client, I was expressing the concept of the small, narrow, very short interlock principle at the bottom of the door. Let's put a drip cap out there. The client's door fabricator was actually incorporating a curved-in style weather stripping, which is great. That would have worked just fine. But getting the jambs on the header sealed, the sill you can contend with. But thinking about it up front is important. Also, in the world of interlocking weather stripping, certainly there is interlocking weather stripping available for doors as well, where you will literally have a couple of nested J hooks. You'll have a couple of L hooks that will connect together. You don't see those very often today, but if you looked at construction that was 100 years ago, you'll very often see rabbeted edges that will have an integrated interlocking weather stripping, etc. Interlocking weather stripping can be both effective and basically concealed. You don't really see it. Extremely long lasting. The only time that you have a problem with it, it's a classic. I get this call about once a decade, and it's fun because the client is befuddled, bewildered, betricked, bedazzled, has no idea why their door doesn't work. And it's fun because I know the answer, and it's super cheap to fix. So a client will have an interlocking threshold, a home that they've lived in for 20 years. They never thought about it, didn't know it was there, didn't care, doesn't know anything about it. It's not their area of expertise. Didn't realize that there was a drip cap underneath, a hook strip. Painter comes, painting the whole house, door comes down, boom, 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 door looks beautiful. Been sanded, resealed, the door looks gorgeous. Painter goes to hang the door, can't push the door all the way closed, but he keeps trying. Tries to get it closed, almost gets it closed, and calls the owner. I don't know what the problem here is. Your door was fine, and now your door is broke. Client calls me, and I say every time, reach down, put your hand below the door. Is there something nailed down there? Oh my gosh. Wait a minute. Comes back, oh my gosh, yes, I didn't know there was anything there. So what they've done is, as you can predict, they've crushed this drip cap. Pardon me, I keep saying drip cap. They've crushed this hook strip down. So it's a simple fix. Door comes off, sawhorses, pull the old one off, nail the new one on. You're right as rain. Really inexpensive fix and very effective. That happened to a client in a new construction, but I've had people in the past call me on homes that were 40 years old. The northwest side of Chicago, the suburbs right in that area. All that development was done in the 50s and 60s and before, obviously. But the 50s and 60s, and when you see those masonry bi and tri-flat, thinking of the right term, a duplex or a triplex, not a duplex. Anyway, a typical Norwich or Harwood Heights home where there are interlocking thresholds there. So when you take that door off, be mindful, don't set it down. Any of the manufacturers that I've discussed are all good in terms of supplying material. Some have more than others, as you saw. Some have an advantage over the other in terms of the J-hook style. I like the one with the offset. And I would encourage the use of interlocking threshold, certainly, every single time that you can, because they mechanically seal. Now, they don't have a great R value because you've got metal to metal, but they're going to keep that driving rain out. The sand, I have clients who call me from Chicago and they need weather stripping for a particular reason, because it will get to 12 degrees and it will park there for the next 4 weeks. I have clients that call me from the American Southwest. They want an interlocking threshold. They don't have a problem with 12 degrees generally. They have a problem with scorpions and getting in, so they want to mechanically lock that stuff. So interlocking weather stripping, in particular thresholds, is extremely old technology, but is extremely effective today. And hopefully this video illustrating the different hook strips and how they can be applied is of use to you. If you have any questions on this or any other weather stripping project, please feel free. My name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and thank you. Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.